The air in the courtroom was a suffocating blend of stale air conditioning and thinly veiled animosity. Judge Alastair Finch, a man whose face was a study in legal exhaustion, leaned forward, his gaze fixed on the two figures at the center of the unfolding drama. On one side stood Fire Chief Mark Callahan, his posture rigid with an anger he was barely containing. His blue uniform, a symbol of his 25 years of service, felt like a target painted on his chest. On the other side, her blonde bob perfectly coiffed, her pearl necklace gleaming under the fluorescent lights, was Brenda Sterling, the formidable head of the Oakhaven HOA. Her expression was a mask of practiced concern, but her eyes, cold and sharp, betrayed the triumph she felt. "Chief Callahan," the judge began, his voice dry. "The Oakhaven Homeowners Association has presented a significant body of evidence. Receipts, emails, and witness testimonies all point to a pattern of harassment and threats against Ms. Sterling and the HOA board." Mark's knuckles, white as bone, gripped the edge of the polished mahogany table. "Harassment? Your Honor, they're calling me a liar because I refuse to install a sprinkler system in every single one of their ridiculous, oversized hedges." A collective murmur rippled through the gallery. The residents of Oakhaven, their faces a mix of morbid curiosity and unwavering support for their HOA, looked at him as if he were a wild animal. Brenda Sterling's voice, smooth as silk and dripping with righteous indignation, cut through the noise. "It's not about hedges, Your Honor. It's about safety. It's about protecting our community from a man who believes he is above the rules." She cast a theatrical, pitying glance at Mark. "Chief Callahan's retaliation for our refusal to approve his outlandish spending requests for the fire department has been relentless. He's called me a tyrant and the HOA a cult. He even threatened to burn our community to the ground if we didn't back down." Mark felt a hot flush of fury rise to his cheeks. "That's a damn lie, Brenda, and you know it." "Order!" the judge bellowed, his gavel hitting the block with a sharp crack. Brenda, unfazed, continued her performance. "My community has been living in fear." The threats escalated from phone calls to anonymous letters. "Now, the city is burning." She didn't have to say it out loud. The fire, a blaze that had consumed 2 homes and nearly taken the lives of a family on the outskirts of Oakhaven, was the reason they were here. The city's collective fear, fueled by local news coverage, had turned into a mob mentality, and Brenda had been the one to expertly stoke the flames of suspicion. "Ms. Sterling," Judge Finch said, his tone softening slightly, "your request for a restraining order is predicated on these claims. But to link Chief Callahan to the arson, that's a serious accusation." Brenda leaned forward, her composure never wavering. "Your Honor, the city's lead investigator, Detective Miles Corbin, is here. He can testify to the evidence we've provided." A man in a sharp suit and a grim expression stepped forward. Miles Corbin, a detective Mark had known for years, a man he'd shared more than a few beers with after a long shift, refused to meet his gaze. Mark's heart sank. This wasn't just Brenda's charade anymore. This was personal. "Detective Corbin," the judge said, "do you have something to add?" Miles cleared his throat, his voice low and devoid of emotion. "We've been investigating the arson, Your Honor. The fire was started with an accelerant, a mix of kerosene and gasoline. We found traces of it on the property of one of the victims. And we also found something else." He pulled out a small, sealed evidence bag. Inside was a piece of scorched fabric, a small metal button still attached. "This was found in the bushes near the scene," Miles said, his voice flat. "It's a fragment of a standard-issue firefighter's jacket. The button matches the ones used on the City of Oakhaven's uniforms. It also has a distinctive burn pattern, consistent with a fire started from a small container, not a large blaze." A gasp went through the courtroom. Mark felt a cold knot of dread tighten in his stomach. It wasn't possible. His jacket was at home, in his closet. He had been on the scene the morning after the fire, wearing a different uniform. He had been a first responder, not an arsonist. "And there's this," Brenda said, her voice a low, triumphant whisper. She handed a USB drive to her lawyer, who plugged it into the courtroom's large monitor. An image flashed on the screen, a grainy surveillance photo taken from a neighbor's security camera. It was dark, blurry, but the figure in the image was undeniably a man in a firefighter's uniform. He was walking away from the Sterling home, a dark container in his hand. Brenda's voice, now a crescendo of feigned horror, cut through the stunned silence. This was taken the night before the fire. The rain, a cold, persistent drizzle, had turned the streets of Oakhaven into a dark mirror reflecting the city's turmoil. Mark Callahan, now stripped of his uniform and his authority, sat in his truck, watching the sirens flash in the distance. The new fire was a cruel, ironic punchline to the day's events. He was a firefighter, and a fire was burning, but he was powerless. His phone, which he had silenced, was a useless piece of metal now. He felt a deep, profound emptiness. The only thing he had left was a worn-out key and a desperate hope. He drove past the police barricades, a silent, unrecognized ghost in the city he had once commanded. As he got closer to the fire, the air grew thick with the smell of smoke and wet earth. He saw his men, his brothers, in their gear, their faces grim, their movements a practiced, synchronized ballet of controlled chaos. He saw the new acting chief, a younger man named Ben Carter, who avoided eye contact as Mark drove by. Ben was good, competent, but he was no leader. Not like Mark. A bitter pang of betrayal twisted in his gut. He parked on a side street, a safe distance from the chaos, and watched. He knew this fire, knew it in his bones. The way the smoke billowed, the rapid spread, the telltale orange lick of a hot, fast burn. This wasn't a natural disaster. This was a message, and he had a sickening feeling he knew who it was for. He picked up the old, leather-bound book from the passenger seat. The log. He flipped through the pages, the faded ink chronicling his father's career. He stopped at a section marked, Incidents of Note. There, in his father's precise, deliberate handwriting, were notes on every suspicious fire in the city's history. There were a handful of them over the years. Fires started with accelerants, fires that seemed to vanish as quickly as they appeared. The last one was dated 10 years ago. A small blaze in an empty shed on the edge of the Oakhaven development. The cause was listed as unexplained. But his father's notes, scrawled in the margin, told a different story. Arson. Suspect. Unknown, but signs point to a planned, calculated event. Possibly tied to a property dispute. Mark felt a jolt of recognition. Property dispute. The Oakhaven development had been a massive undertaking, and it had been plagued with lawsuits and infighting. His father's notes mentioned a particularly vicious one involving a woman named Eleanor Sterling, Brenda's mother-in-law. Eleanor, a prominent and notoriously difficult resident, had been feuding with the developers over the exact same sprinkler system issue that Brenda had brought up with him. The detail was so specific, so mundane, yet so chillingly familiar. He put the book down, his mind racing. Was this all a calculated move, a generational grudge? It was a flimsy theory, but it was all he had. If Brenda was using her mother-in-law's old playbook, then this was more than just a power play. It was a pattern, a cold, deliberate pattern of destruction. He needed proof, and there was only one person who could give it to him. He pulled out his phone and dialed. "Sarah, it's Mark." His lawyer, Sarah Jenkins, answered with a tired sigh. "Mark, I told you not to contact me after hours. The restraining order. I know. But I need you to do something for me. Something that could blow this whole thing wide open." He spoke in a low, urgent whisper. "I need you to get a copy of the case file from the Oakhaven arson case 10 years ago. The one involving Eleanor Sterling and the developers. My dad's notes say it was filed under property dispute, unexplained fire. I need to see the police report, the witness statements, everything. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Mark, that's a cold case. It's probably buried in some archive. What makes you think it's connected? Brenda's playing a long game, Sarah. This isn't just about me. It's a family thing. I need to prove that she didn't just stumble onto this evidence. She engineered it. And I have a gut feeling that this new fire isn't a random act either. It's part of the same playbook. She's trying to escalate the situation, to make the city believe her lies. And you think an old case file is going to prove that? Sarah's voice was skeptical, but he could hear a flicker of interest in her tone. It's a start. Look for anything on accelerant, kerosene, gasoline, anything that ties her mother-in-law to that fire. And if you find a connection, we go back to the judge. We demand a new hearing. He could hear her typing on a keyboard in the background. Okay, Mark. I'll see what I can do. But if I don't find anything, you have to let this go. You're a target, and you're making yourself an easy one. I can't let it go, Sarah. Not yet. He hung up the phone and watched as the fire engines began to pack up, the orange glow on the horizon fading to a dull red. The rain was letting up, but the city's fear was still burning bright. The drive to Frank Peterson's house was a tense, silent journey through Oak Haven's meticulously planned streets. The streetlights cast long, ominous shadows, and every parked car felt like a watchful eye. Mark kept his foot light on the gas pedal, his eyes darting from side to side, a phantom of the man he used to be. The restraining order was a physical wall between him and the people he had sworn to protect, but the psychological one was far more insidious. He was a stranger in his own city. He pulled up to Frank's house, a small, unassuming bungalow on a street that bordered the more opulent sections of Oak Haven. The porch light was on, a warm beacon in the otherwise dreary night. He got out of the truck, the cold rain now a gentle spray on his face. He felt exposed, vulnerable. He was walking into a trap, a game Brenda was playing with him. But he had to trust his gut. Frank was a friend. He was one of the few people in Oak Haven who had no interest in the HOA's politics, a man who believed in the truth, not in public opinion. He knocked on the door, the sound a loud report in the quiet night. He waited, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The door opened slowly, revealing a grizzled, tired face. Frank Peterson was a man in his late 60s, with a shock of white hair and a kind but weary expression. He looked at Mark, his eyes widening in surprise. Mark, what in God's name are you doing here? I heard about what happened. It's all over the news. I know, Frank, but I need your help. I'm not the man they're saying I am. Frank stepped aside, inviting him in. The interior of the house was warm and smelled of old coffee and wood polish. On a small table in the living room, a bank of monitors hummed, displaying a grid of security camera feed. Frank was obsessed with his cameras. He had them on every corner of his property, a hobby he'd taken up after retiring. It was a good thing, because it was exactly what Mark needed. Sit down, son. You look like you've seen a ghost. Frank poured 2 mugs of coffee. I don't know what's going on with Brenda Sterling, but it doesn't sound good. She's a piece of work, always has been. Mark took the mug, the warmth a welcome comfort in his cold hands. She's trying to frame me, Frank, for the fires. She said I was at her house the night before the first one, that I was threatening her. She showed the court a grainy photo from her neighbor's security camera. Frank's eyebrows shot up. Grainy photo? What, did the neighbor have a potato for a camera? My system is top of the line. I have a clear view of that whole street, all the way to her driveway. Mark felt a jolt of hope. You do? Frank, please tell me you have footage from that night. The night before the fire. The one she's claiming I was there. Frank walked over to his monitors, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He pulled up a series of folders, each one labeled with a date. He clicked on the folder for the night in question, and a long timeline of video clips appeared on the screen. Okay, Frank said, his voice low and focused. This is a full view of my street. The Sterling house is just over there, at the end of the cul-de-sac. Now, what time did she say you were there? 3 a.m. Frank fast-forwarded the footage. The screen showed a slow, mundane progression of time, a lone car passing by, a raccoon scurrying across a lawn. And then, at exactly 3:02 a.m., a figure appeared on the screen. Mark leaned in, his breath catching in his throat. The figure was wearing a firefighter's jacket. He had a dark container in his hand. It was the exact image Brenda had shown the court. But Frank's camera was high definition. It was a clear, crisp image, not a blurry mess. As the figure turned, his face was clearly visible. It was a man, but it wasn't Mark. The man was younger, with a lean, sharp face and a familiar, almost sneering expression. Mark's heart sank, then soared with a grim fury. He knew this man. It was Derek Vance, a new hire at the fire department, a man Mark had butted heads with on more than one occasion. Derek was known for his insubordination, his cocky attitude, and his questionable connections. He was a close friend of Brenda Sterling's son, a fact that had always made Mark uneasy. Derek Vance, Mark whispered, a low growl of recognition in his voice. He's Brenda's accomplice. Frank looked at him, his face a mask of shock. You're kidding me, Vance? That arrogant kid? What's he doing with Brenda Sterling? He's her hired gun, Mark said, his mind putting the pieces together. She's been grooming him, using him. He's the one who set the fire, not me. He's the one who planted the jacket fragment, the accelerant, and she's the one who used her connections to get the photo, and then manipulated the evidence to make it look like me. Frank's face hardened. That's not just a frame job, Mark. That's a conspiracy. You need to take this to the police. To Miles Korb. The silence in the diner booth stretched, thick and heavy with the weight of Mark's revelation. Mayor Thompson, his usual veneer of jovial authority gone, simply stared at the USB drive on the table. He was a man who preferred to manage problems, not confront them, and this was a crisis of an entirely new magnitude. The city was already on edge, the whispers of arson and betrayal rippling through every neighborhood. The last thing he needed was a full-blown political scandal. This is a very serious accusation, Mark, the mayor said, his voice a strained whisper. Are you sure? See for yourself, Mayor. Mark slid the drive closer. Brenda Sterling told the court a lie. She said I was on her property at 3 a.m. The surveillance photo she presented was doctored. But my friend, a retired firefighter with a top-of-the-line security system, has the original footage. It's a clear, high-definition image. And the man in that footage is not me. It's Derek Vance. The mayor's eyes widened. Vance? He's a firefighter, isn't he? A new one. He's a new hire, Mark confirmed, a grim edge to his voice. And he's a close friend of Brenda's son. He's been her accomplice all along. He set the fires, not me. She's been using the city's fear to destroy my career and to put the HOA in complete control. She was never worried about the fire department's budget. She was worried about a man who couldn't be controlled. A man who was standing in her way. The mayor picked up the USB drive, his hands trembling slightly. If this is true, it would be a disaster. The city would be in an uproar. The HOA, they're powerful, Mark. They have a lot of influence. They have influence because you let them have it, Mark said, his voice firm and unwavering. You let a small group of people with petty grudges and a taste for power run rampant. The city isn't theirs to control. It's ours. And it's time to take it back. The mayor looked at Mark, a flicker of something new, not fear, but a dawning realization, in his eyes. He saw the man he had once known, the dedicated fire chief who had saved lives and built a department from the ground up. He saw the fire in Mark's eyes, a resolve that had been forged in the crucible of betrayal. What do you want me to do? The mayor asked, his voice low and serious. I want you to call an emergency meeting of the city council, Mark said. I want you to show them that footage. I want you to have Miles Corbin and his team at the meeting. And I want you to demand an immediate, transparent investigation into Brenda Sterling and the HOA. I want her to face the full force of the law for what she's done. And when all is said and done, I want my job back. The mayor nodded, his mind already spinning. He had an election coming up, and this was a political minefield. But he also knew that if he didn't do the right thing, if he let this conspiracy fester, the city would never forgive him. He looked at Mark and then at the USB drive. The choice was clear. You'll get your meeting, the mayor said. I'll call the council members myself. And I'll have the press there. The city deserves to know the truth. Mark felt a wave of relief wash over him. The first domino had fallen. He had the mayor on his side, and soon, he would have the city council. But he knew that Brenda Sterling wouldn't go down without a fight. She had a network of spies, a web of lies she had meticulously woven. He had to be careful. He left the diner, the rain now a steady downpour, a fitting backdrop for the storm he was about to unleash. He drove to a small motel on the edge of town, a place where he could hide and prepare for the coming confrontation. He knew that from this point forward, every move he made would be scrutinized. He was no longer a victim. He was a hunter. Meanwhile, in her perfectly manicured Oak Haven home, Brenda Sterling was a whirlwind of controlled fury. A phone call from one of her contacts at the fire department had just informed her of the late-night fire chief sighting. The news was a cold, bitter taste in her mouth. She had thought she had Mark cornered, his reputation destroyed, his power stripped away. She had thought he would simply disappear. But he hadn't. He was fighting back. She paced her living room, her mind racing. She had prepared for this, had contingency plans for every possible outcome. Her network of informants was in place. Her influence in the city council was strong. And her evidence, the doctored photo, was solid. She had every advantage. But she also had a gnawing, unsettling feeling. Mark wasn't a fool. He wouldn't show up without a reason. He had something she didn't know about. She sat down at her desk, a small, elegant piece of furniture that was the nerve center of her operation. She pulled out a list of names. HOA members, city officials, police contact. She needed to know what Mark had found. She needed to know who he was talking to. She needed to find out if anyone. The emergency city council meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. the following morning. The news of the unscheduled assembly, coupled with the continued whispers about the arson and Mark's suspension, had created a media frenzy. Reporters and camera crews swarmed the city hall steps, their microphones thrust forward like weapons, their questions a barrage of accusations and demands for answers. The city was a powder keg, and Mark Callahan, with his little USB drive, was about to light the fuse. Mark, accompanied by his lawyer Sarah Jenkins, arrived early. Sarah, still skeptical but now fiercely loyal, was a study in controlled nerve. She had spent the last few hours poring over the evidence on the drive, her disbelief slowly giving way to a grim determination. The high-definition footage was irrefutable. It was a clear, damning portrait of Brenda Sterling's treachery. Inside the council chambers, the air was thick with tension. The council members, their faces a mix of anxiety and anticipation, took their seat. Mayor Thompson, looking older and more haggard than Mark had ever seen him, sat at the head of the table, his posture rigid. In the gallery, the public seats were already filled to capacity, a sea of faces, some angry, some fearful, some hopeful. Brenda Sterling sat in the front row, a serene, confident smile plastered on her face, a clear message to everyone in the room. She was still in control. The meeting began with a brief, perfunctory statement from the mayor. "We have convened this emergency session to address some new information that has come to light regarding the ongoing fire investigation and the restraining order against Fire Chief Mark Callahan." He motioned to Mark and Sarah. "Chief Callahan's legal counsel will present the findings." Sarah stood, her voice clear and strong. Your Honor, council members, we are here today to present evidence that proves Chief Callahan's innocence, and, in doing so, reveals a deep-seated conspiracy orchestrated by Brenda Sterling and the Oakhaven Homeowners Association. A ripple of shock went through the room. Brenda's smile tightened, but she held her ground. She knew this was coming. She had a plan. Sarah inserted the USB drive into the large monitor. The primary piece of evidence against Chief Callahan was a grainy surveillance photo, which Ms. Sterling's attorney claimed showed the chief on her property at 3 a.m. the night before the first fire. The quality of the photo was poor, but a firefighter's uniform was clearly visible. However, what Ms. Sterling failed to mention is that the original, high-definition footage exists, taken from a different camera on the same street. She clicked a button and the screen flashed to life. The first image was the blurry photo presented in court. The next image was the clear, crisp footage from Frank Peterson's camera. The contrast was stark. The man in this footage, Sarah said, her voice rising with a crescendo of accusation, is not Fire Chief Mark Callahan. It is Derek Vance, a new hire at the Oakhaven Fire Department. Furthermore, we have a time-stamped image from the same camera, taken just moments later, which shows Mr. Vance discarding the very container that was used to carry the accelerant. The murmurs in the gallery turned into a collective gasp. The council members, their faces pale with shock, stared at the screen. Brenda's mask of composure finally broke. Her eyes darted to the side, a flicker of raw, unrestrained panic on her face. Her victory was slipping through her fingers. Before anyone could speak, the doors to the council chambers burst open. Detective Miles Corbin stood in the doorway, his face grim, his posture rigid. He was flanked by a team of uniformed police officers. His eyes, cold and focused, were fixed on Brenda Sterling. "Detective Corbin," the mayor said, his voice a mixture of surprise and relief. "What is the meaning of this?" Miles ignored him. He walked directly to Brenda Sterling, his hand reaching for the handcuffs on his belt. "Brenda Sterling, you are under arrest for conspiracy, arson, and obstruction of justice." Brenda stood up, her face a furious, disbelief-filled scowl. "On what grounds? This is an outrage. You can't do this to me. I'll have your badge for this, Miles." Miles's voice was a low, steady rumble. "Your house, Ms. Sterling, is currently being searched. We found a hidden compartment in your office desk. Inside, we found a cache of documents, detailed spreadsheets of HOA funds transferred to a private investigator named Alan Finch, the judge's nephew, I might add, and a series of incriminating text messages and emails between you and Derek Vance. It's all there. The entire conspiracy. The plans to frame Chief Callahan, the instructions to plant the evidence, the notes on the accelerants to use. It's a perfect case." A stunned silence fell over the room. The crowd, a moment ago a cacophony of whispers, was now completely still. Brenda Sterling, T.